Hello and welcome to the virtual Waterfront Walking Tour. My name is Stina Troyer and I'm with Harbor WildWatch. Together with the Harbor History Museum and the Downtown Waterfront Alliance, we've partnered to bring you the Waterfront Walking Tours for the past 6 years. Because of the current situation in our world, this year's tour will be brought to you virtually through Facebook and YouTube. You can tune in to learn more about the 2 tours that we do, Skiffs to Spirits and the Wonders of the Waterfront. Today I will be your guide for a segment of the Wonders of the Waterfront tour. I'm particularly fond of this tour because it explores the incredible wildlife and natural resources of Gig Harbor's past and present. Quick caveat though, I'm super passionate about Gig Harbor, but I'm not a historian. And it's simply not possible to cover everything about Gig Harbor on each stop. But if you'd like to share your stories or drop some knowledge in the comment section, feel free to type away and do that. You're also welcome to ask us questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Today we're going to talk about Austin Estuary Park. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to recognize that we're on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people and other speakers of the Southern Lushootseed language since time immemorial. The name for the Puyallup people in Lushootseed is Spoyalapopsh, and it means generous and welcoming to all people. We acknowledge these people as the keepers of the land and pay our respects to them. With that, welcome to Austin Estuary. This spot was used by the Spoyalapopsh for thousands of years because of the abundant natural resources. On the land, the trees were utilized for structure and transportation. Undergrowth plants provided medicine, food, and raw materials for weaving baskets and clothing. Deer and other mammals provided food and leather. In the water, salmon were an important source of protein. Waterfowl were cultivated for their meat and feathers. And shellfish like clams, mussels, oysters, snails, crabs, they were all harvested here. Overall, this is a place of abundant natural resources and almost constant change. Looking out at the water, this change is apparent in the ebb and flow of the tide across the mudflat twice a day. The tidal change is a result of the position of the sun and the moon. When they are aligned, as noted by either a full or new moon, we can observe the most extreme high and low tides. These extremes are going to fluctuate between seasons, with the lowest low tides happening at night in the winter and during the day in the summer. At this location, during the highest of high tides, saltwater can reach all the way up to this picnic table, and the lowest low tides expose several acres of tideland. The water you see is a mixture of fresh and salt water, which is flowing from Donkey Creek and saltwater from the Pacific Ocean. This mixture sets up the scene for us to learn the estuary dance. You gotta take some fresh water, take some salt water, mix it together, you have an estuary. Now, the Puget Sound is the second largest estuary in the United States and has over 10,000 rivers and streams mixing in with the salt water of the Pacific Ocean. The Puget Sound estuary is part of an even larger ecosystem, the Salish Sea. Officially named in 2009, the Salish Sea is comprised of 3 large bodies of water: the Puget Sound, which we've already talked about, the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and the Georgia Basin in Canada. The first known use of the term Salish Sea was in 1988 when marine biologist Bert Weber from Bellingham, Washington, created the name for the combined waters in the region with the intention to complement the 3 names, not replace them. He believed that the adoption of the term would raise consciousness about taking care of the region's waters and ecosystems as a whole. Weber's efforts are credited with the official recognition of the name Salish Sea in Canada and the US. The name pays tribute to the Coast Salish, who are the indigenous people who lived in the southwest British Columbia and northwest Washington along the Salish Sea and share a common linguistic and cultural origin. In addition to being culturally important, the Salish Sea is a unique ecosystem with great ecological importance. The Salish Sea has 4,246 miles of coastline, having been carved out by glaciers over 10,000 years ago. 210 feet is the average depth, but because of the incredible power of erosion, the deepest point is 2,133 feet in the Butte Inlet in BC, Canada. Part of the appeal of having one name for this body of water is that animals move throughout these ecosystems regardless of international borders. Having one name makes protecting the habitat of these many incredible creatures more comprehensive. The Salish Sea is home to 38 species of mammal, 172 species of birds, 253 species of fish, and more than 3,000 species of marine macroinvertebrates. Macroinvertebrates, of course, are organisms that lack a spine, invertebrates, and macro means they're spineless animals that are large enough to be seen with the naked eye. Things like snails, slugs, crabs, clams, you get it. Austin Estuary Park here is just a small part of the greater Salish Sea, but we can still observe a large variety of life. This park was also restored as part of the Donkey Creek Restoration Project that we elaborated on at another stop. This park has a short walking trail that leads along the water through the plentiful native plants and grasses which are intentionally left to run wild. As you walk out, approach the water quietly, as this area provides great opportunities to observe many different species of birds all in one place. It's all the better if you bring some binoculars so you can take time to take a closer look. You might notice some awesome things. Over the years, we've seen a diverse mix of birds. Common birds that you might see year-round include blue herons, gulls, mallards, bald eagles, kingfishers, crows, cormorants, and Canada geese. In the winter, seabirds migrate into the Puget Sound, and you might see things like hooded mergansers with a fancy feather hairdo. There's also the ever so adorable buffleheads, as well as golden eyes, and my favorite, harlequin ducks. Birds are considered a good indicator of estuary health because they're mobile creatures. If a site doesn't meet their needs, they'll simply leave. Granted, if you don't see any birds, they are also mobile, so it's possible that a loud group walked by before you and scared them all away. If you repeatedly saw no birds over multiple visits, now that could be cause for concern. To better understand the presence of seabird populations throughout the Puget Sound, you can check out some of the incredible community science we do with the Seattle Audubon Society's Puget Sound Seabird Surveys. I could go on about the ecology here, but let's switch gears from natural history to the recent history of this site. You might be wondering, where did Austin Estuary get its name? Here's a hint. It was during the time period when Gig Harbor was a growing community of fishermen and boat builders and needed a steady supply of lumber. In 1909, a native of New Hampshire named Charles Osgood Austin opened a sawmill business right where the Harbor History Museum sits today. It was, of course, called the Austin Lumber Mill, and you can tune into our Skips to Spirits tour to learn more about Gig Harbor's history of lumber mills. The last thing I'd like to point out at this stop is that it's the site of one of the old ferry landings in Gig Harbor Bay, which is near the marina over in the Finholm district. Like most of the Puget Sound region, Gig Harbor and its peninsula had long relied on boats as the principal form of transportation. Those silly glaciers sure make it tricky to drive from one place to another. The first steamboat operating in the area was named the Baby Mine, and it was built by Emmett Hunt of nearby Watchet Bay in 1882. That steamboat carried mail, freight, and a maximum of 4 passengers on a route around the peninsula and to Tacoma. The Hunt steamers were part of an even larger network of steamboat services that were operating in the Puget Sound, and they're popularly referred to as the Mosquito Fleet. Because boats were such a primary form of transportation, every community had its own ferry dock, which became the center of activity whenever the boat landed. In addition to providing human transportation, steamboats were also used to carry livestock, feed, produce, bricks, and other cargo between the peninsula and Tacoma. Within a few short years, ferries were making 3 regular stops in the harbor itself: Young's Landing on the east side of the bay, the dock at the head of the bay by the area which is now the Peninsula Yacht, and People's Dock near the Maritime Pier. The dock across from us here at the head of the bay was the first one to handle automobile traffic in 1918. Ferries were an important part of everyday life for harbor families until about the 1950s. We'll talk about Gig Harbor's ferry history during our stop at the Scansey Brothers Park, so be sure to tune in and catch more about that. Well, that's it for today's tour, so thank you so much for joining us as we explore Austin Estuary. Be sure to tune in next time for our tour of one of Gig Harbor's newest parks, the Ansich Waterfront Park. Tell your family, friends, and anyone thinking about visiting Gig Harbor to watch these videos and learn a little bit more about the beautiful waterfront and how we're all, past and present, tied to the water.